gender-based violence is an area that I research, and I think it's really important for us to continue to raise awareness about the harm experienced by women and children and people who are vulnerable to abuse. I think this is a great gathering of the community to let the government know that we're in this work and we're doing it and we're serious about receiving the support that we need as a community. So different communities have different experiences, and I think when we're discussing the African Nova Scotian or Black communities, we have to consider the fact that there are many systemic issues that we're already facing, and violence is often a response to context and sometimes a response to trauma as well. So yes, I think looking at the research that has to do with people's various experiences is important, but do knowing that there can be differences in terms of rural and city and even marginalized groups, what they experience. It's important because we're here, we're all affected by violence in certain ways, and some of us have experienced it or had family members, or even if we don't know it personally, it's an issue of justice, and I work for the Justice Institute, and this is what we do. So I thought it was important for us to come out and represent for our community, for our organization, and also stand in solidarity with folks. Gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, domestic homicide, these are issues that are now coming to the surface, but people have been fighting against for decades and decades. So we need to continue to be in the fight. This is a matter of justice, and it's a matter of justice for all of us. It doesn't just affect a small group of people, it affects many different people. So we're happy to come out and stand in solidarity, and for me, I think this was a good experience to just see how many people are still invested in the topic.
Police smart investigating! Shame on you! Survivors need action! Justice is due! Break the silence! End the violence! Together we rise! Together we rise!
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lynn Gallant Blackburn. After my 36-year-old sister, Paula Ann Gallant, was murdered in the safety of her home by a man she loved and trusted, I vowed to not only find justice for her, but to ensure her death served a meaningful purpose. For the past 19 years, I have shared Paula's story and our journey through this horrific, senseless, and selfish act of intimate partner violence, in the hopes that people would come to understand that Paula could be any woman living amongst us. She, like the silhouettes standing here today, represent all women murdered by their intimate partner and the women that are still at risk. Men's violence against women has no boundaries. The she may be someone's mother, someone's teacher, someone's neighbor. Maybe it's the lady serving you lunch or cutting your hair. It can happen to someone you know, like my sister. We need to stand up and not settle for anything less than action. With the recent rise in intimate partner violence and gender-based violence in Nova Scotia, my advocacy journey has been amplified, and I will not allow my voice or the voices of the women silenced by murder fall on deaf ears. Declaring intimate partner violence as an epidemic is a first step, but it does not stop the violence. This happens when people in positions of power decide to be the heroes that women need. Someone just has to say this is enough and have the courage to raise their hand and be accountable. I know the changes take time and money and are complicated, but there are many things we could be doing now to move towards that end. In the recent stabbing at our emergency department in late January, our government was quick to find a solution to keep hospital staff safe by installing metal detectors. It was a positive reaction to a very serious and ongoing challenge. We need to see the same immediate reactions to things we can do now for intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. Tolerance of status quo is not acceptable. Increased funding and justice reform is essential, but immediate change can and should happen now before we have another woman murdered in Nova Scotia. On January 14th, I wrote an open letter to 3 ministers and our premier, asking them to be accountable and to also listen to the voices of those with lived intimate partner violence experience. Circumstance made me a victim, but choice made me a survivor. And I know my experience can drive small changes that can be made now and will make a difference. I did it before, and I won't stop advocating until we are heard and action happens now. The impact of Paula's murder was like a bomb that exploded, and the shrapnel pierced all who loved her. Forever we will carry fragments of that horrible explosion in our souls, all to varying degrees, but forever. Even the strongest among us surrendered to the powers of intimate partner and gender-based violence. No woman or child or family in Nova Scotia should die at the hands of their partner, and no family should experience the pain our family did. Who is going to be the government? Who is going to be the hero in government? Minister Drouin, Minister Maguire, Minister Thompson, the Premier? Who has the guts to step forward and say change is going to start now? If this was your Paula, your Linda, your Brenda, your Peyton, I would hope you too would expect immediate action. I'll leave you with this quote. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something I can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Hi, everyone. I want to start by just acknowledging and thanking the survivors in the crowd, the families of survivors, and the families of folks who didn't survive. This is a sad but important conversation that we need to keep on having. When we came together on steps like this years ago after the Mass Casualty Commission, and we fought for people like Christina to be on the panel that looked at the Mass Casualty Commission, it was because we understand this to be a systemic issue. It's a personal issue that hits so many individuals and families, a shocking percentage of women and gender diverse folks, but it's a systemic issue, make no mistake. We need to address it in our schools, we need to address it in our families, we need to address it in our communities, and we need to address it in our justice system. But more needs to happen. When we brought legislation banning non-disclosure agreements, the government said, well, we don't really need that. It's not what they're doing in other provinces. When we brought, and we'll bring that legislation again tomorrow, by the way. When we brought legislation declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic and codifying what was found in Turning the Tide, we were told it's only symbolic. And it was only because a group of survivors and advocates shamed this government into passing that bill that we did. And it is only because that bill became law, I believe, that we are able to name the epidemic that is happening and unfolding as we speak. I truly believe that without that legislation, we wouldn't know that we've had 7 victims in the last several months, because we wouldn't have had a name for it. And now we have a name for it, and now that we know better, we need to do better. Today, we're going to bring legislation to actually address intimate partner violence and gender-based violence with epidemic-level funding for frontline organizations, and importantly, the inclusion of those frontline workers and of survivors at the table when it is determined how to go forward. And so I want to say we are making progress. It is painful and it is slow and it is not enough, but we are making progress. So please Don't give up. Please continue to fight. For me, I have 3 children. I have 2 teenage daughters. I see what's happening in school. I know the conversations that are happening. I know how interconnected these issues are. We all are or know survivors, every single one of us. And so we know better. And so now we have to do better. So for anyone who would like to join us at Province House, you are warmly welcome to the People's House, where we will be debating our bill today around 3 o'clock. But at any other time, I urge you to reach out to myself or any of our other colleagues. This is an issue that cannot be ignored. This government will tell you that they are spending $100 million to combat gender-based violence, and what they are telling you is not true. So that is not new money. They're cobbling that money together from line items that already exist, and in fact, while we are seeing a small increase to transition houses and other frontline organizations, an increase that's been needed for a long time, it remains insufficient. We continue to have many of the programs that are the most important that are based on grants and funding that is not renewed year over year, leaving the entire sector in a state of precarity. And we have no indication that we are doing the real work for our kids that we need to do in terms of curriculum in P through 12, in terms of working with people at risk of perpetrating gender-based violence, to make sure we stop it before it happens. This is the systemic work that we need to have done. The window dressing is nice. Increases in funding are always welcome. We need to demand more. We'll be doing that in the legislature on all of your behalf, and I urge you to use your voices whenever and however you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia.
End the violence. Together we rise. Together we rise. Break the silence. End the violence. Together we rise. Together we rise.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today we gather not just as individuals, but as a united force, standing in solidarity with those affected by domestic violence and honoring the survivors who have fought to reclaim their lives. We march today because silence is no longer an option. Domestic violence is not just happening behind closed doors. It is a crisis that is tearing through families, communities, and generations. And we're here to say no more. As a survivor myself, I know the weight of fear, the pain of isolation, and the feeling of being trapped with no way out. I know what it means to live in the shadows of abuse, believing that no one will hear your cries for help. But I also know the power of resilience, the strength of community, and the unshakable truth that healing truly is possible. Today, we march for the women who are suffering in silence. We march for the children who are witnessing violence in their homes, believing that this is what true love looks like. We march for the men who are carrying unhealed trauma, never given the tools to process their pain in healthy ways. We march for every family that has been torn apart by domestic violence. We must recognize that domestic violence does not discriminate. It affects people of all backgrounds, races, and economic statutes. But in the African Nova Scotian community, we face unique barriers, systematic racism, generational trauma, and a lack of culturally responsive support services. These challenges make it even harder for our women and our men and our families to break free from cycles of abuse. We cannot allow this to continue. We need a safe spaces for survivors to heal. We need support programs for our men to unlearn violence and embrace true healing. We need more education, more resources, and more action. Domestic violence is not just a woman's issue, it is a community issue. And today we say loud and clear that we will not stand by while our loved ones suffer in silence. To every survivor here today, you are seen, you are heard, and you are valued, and you are not alone. To those still fighting and living in fear, We will continue to fight for you. We will continue to march until every person has the right to live without violence. Let today be a reminder that change begins with us. Let this march ignite a movement, honestly, one that turns pain into power, because it can be done. Fear into courage, and silence into a collective voice that demands justice. Together we rise, together we heal, together we end domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Break the silence!
End the violence!
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 Hi everyone, I'm Liz LeClaire. You may know I'm a volunteer with Can't Buy My Silence. If you're not aware of that organization, we've been fighting alongside with the NDP and a number of advocates and the Liberals and our independent member Elizabeth Smith-Crossan to get Bill 144 passed. It is to ban the misuse of NDAs, and it is only one part of all of this. But our government, I'm going to tell you right now, I know everyone else has been really polite about this. My experience with this government has been constant shutdown, silencing, not answering phone calls, not answering emails, not speaking to us. We have multiple times invited this premier to be in solidarity with us. Where is he right now? He planned briefings on bills, which he did not have to do today. And he is somewhere over close to the legislature ignoring what we're talking about today. That sends a signal to all of us about what matters. I know for a fact that I have no intention of getting quieter. I'm going to get louder. I will stand with all of you. We're going to be loud. We are going to demand to be heard because I am sick and tired of being told what is trauma-informed. I know what is trauma-informed. Don't tell me what is trauma-informed. Don't hide behind your role of state nurses and a lawyer who may have worked in this space to tell me what's trauma-informed. I know he is standing behind the ministers, the women in his cabinet, hiding behind them, using them as defense against making changes for legislation that we know could make a really big difference in this province. I am proud that you're all here. To the men who showed up today, thank you. That is huge. We need you as a part of this. We know that you are part of the solution. We want you to be part of the solution. And to Carrie Lowe, to Christina, to all the people who have helped organize this, Jen Graves, everyone that have made this come together. I have been at protests like this where we've had 3 people. Look at this crowd. You're amazing. So, if you want to make sure that he knows, who does this government belong to? Does it belong to Tim Houston or does it belong to the people? It belongs to us. To the people. We'll make sure that we're heard. We're going to go down, we're going to be loud outside that house. That is the people's house. You have a right to be there. Be there, be loud, make your voices heard. And I'm very excited. I can't believe I followed Gwendolyn. Her speech was amazing. So anyways, thank you very much. Thank you to Claudia, the NDP, and everybody, and Elizabeth who are here. We appreciate you. And we're looking forward to having more of this. There will be more of these because we're going to keep doing this until he gets the point. This government belongs to us. It doesn't belong to him. Thank you.
End the violence!
Break the silence!
End the violence!
Whatever role you play, we all play a role. It is so important that we are not normalizing violence, that violence does not remain in the silo. We need to start breaking down the silos that exist in our province around violence. Being a role model, taking a leadership role, again, we all play a role. So I'm encouraging people to be curious about what this looks like in the spaces that you're in and how you can take this forward and moving this forward. Workplaces, our education system, institutions, universities, government, all of these places across society need a huge change in regards to the epidemic of gender-based violence. So we are better together in the work ahead. We cannot do this alone. We need our political leaders to take leadership, and we're here to partner, to collaborate, and we need to ensure that we have the right people at the table. Too often our marginalized communities, survivors are not in these spaces when government are making decisions about legislation and law about funding. We need need to hear from the people that have been impacted. There is so much wisdom from survivors and their families in our province, and we need to be prioritizing spaces where they can come together, be safe, speak up about the injustices and the failures and the betrayals that they continue to experience. We are better together in the work ahead, and I hope that from today we are going to use this as an opportunity to get government to be paying attention and really looking at the recommendations and turning the tide together and the other inquiries so that we can work towards solutions so that no more individuals in our province, no more women are killed. We need to start looking at all of the ways that we can do this. Early intervention, core curriculum, core funding to the gender-based violence and advocacy sector is so important. So as the budget got released yesterday, there is many opportunities and things missing from what has been laid out. We need the proper resources to support the work that is taking place across the province to ensure that wherever you're at in the province that you have access to services. Our rural communities are too often impacted by intimate partner violence and gender-based violence because of the complexities of rural living. We need to ensure our rural communities, our marginalized communities are properly supported with the resources that are needed to address the epidemic of gender-based violence. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I just want to name for the men that are here, I've been in this work for 16 years. This is the most men I've seen in a space in my 16 years who need you to be a part of the solution. So I'm really excited to see this. This is part of the cultural shift that's needed, and we are better together. So